This is part 3 of our kale grow along that we are looking at growing under nets or under cover over winter. On part 1 we looked at putting the seeds in, and part 2 we potted them into this size pot, and then today we are looking at potting them into larger pots. So this is a litre pot. When you tip your pot upside down and squeeze it gently, what we should find is a good root network there. So these are looking really good. They're not overly pot bound or anything like that, and they're definitely ready to be potting on. If you've got any stems that are a little bit leggy again and the seed leaves would have likely come off at this point, then we can start looking at putting them in a little bit deeper as well. You could also, in theory, take these plants now and put them into the ground if you've got space and you don't want to pot them up. The reason I'm not looking at doing that today is because I want these plants to be a little bit more established before they go in the beds. Then they're going to have less issue with some pest damage and slugs and snails. And also because I still have my tomatoes and the beds full in the places where I'm looking to put these in. So by putting them up, it gives me more established plants and also time for the other plants in situ to continue ripening and finish up. So this is the usual peat-free compost that I use from Manor Farm, and once again it's not sieved. We only need it sieved if we're doing very fine newly sown seeds rather than potting on. So I'm going to grab myself my pot and just put a tiny bit of the soil in the bottom, and then supporting the plant, popping your fingers either side. I'm just going to turn that upside down. Squeeze the pot if you've not already taken this one out. I've taken this one out a moment ago. Do check around it for any slug eggs. There'll be little white or translucent balls or any slugs underneath as well, just because they will still crawl up the pot and cause us issues. So we're just going to gently pop that in, and then we're going to start backfilling around the edges with the compost. We don't want it to be too densely compacted, we just want them to be well supported in the pots. There we go, that's looking good. And then I'm just going to wipe off what was in the pot before and relabel. So this one was a red kale. So I use a chalk pen and write directly on the pots. You do want to let the chalk dry before you actually water them, otherwise it will come off. That's that one ready. Some of them have got a little bit nibbled. They've obviously had some slug damage where they've been in the little flexi greenhouse outside, but as long as we haven't actually got any damage to the tip, which is the newest emerging leaf, then they will continue to growing absolutely fine. These should be fine now in these new pots for at least 2, maybe even 4 weeks. We are likely to get them in before that because they'll be going in as soon as the tomatoes come out of the tunnel. But if we were in spring right now, they would sit quite happily for a little bit longer. It is also worth having a check under our leaves just to make sure that no butterflies have laid on them or any caterpillars are on them again. These can go back into the same place that we were growing them before, or into your tunnel. The problems with butterflies and flea beetles is pretty much gone now, so we don't need to be worried quite as much about protection, but it is still worth having some protection. But we don't want anywhere that's too warm or anything like that, so just an open place would be great. This particular plant was actually really quite watered before we potted it on. So what I'm going to do is leave this without any water for now, give it a couple of days to dry out, and then I'll start watering it because we don't want those roots to have no oxygen. If the roots have no oxygen, then the roots are just going to rot. It's as simple as that. So if you've got any that are slightly overwatered, then it's not worth watering them again now. If you've got some as well that when you take it out the pot, the roots really haven't established yet, even though this one's looking very good size and it's looking as large as the rest. It's not got a huge amount of roots, so there is still room to leave this one in the pot. So I'm just going to pop a tiny bit of new compost onto the top just because I've disturbed it a little bit, and then leave that one as it is. This one's exactly the same. There's not a huge amount of roots on there, so that's going to stay in the pots. Interestingly, the ones that don't have a huge amount of roots are actually the ones that have been sat in a tray where the water's been getting in more than the rest. So it is likely that they've struggled to establish roots because they have been slightly overwatered. So we'll give them time to dry out. If you've got some where the leaves have been completely munched, then just remove them because they're not going to be doing anything for the plant now. They're also going to entice damage from slugs and things that will often go for our damaged leaves. So it is a good idea to remove them.